Welcome back, Praetors. My name is Doug with 2 Plus Stuff, and today we're going to be unpacking challenges in Horus Heresy 3rd Edition. Now, challenges existed before, but it's taken on a much different tone of the game by the additions of things like gambits and focus rolls and stuff like that, the way weapons have been reworked with initiative modifiers and damage characteristics, that kind of stuff. And to be honest, it can seem a bit overwhelming, very easily. And since there's already so much else to learn in the game, challenges are something that can kind of fall between the cracks, but it's a great place to find a lot of flavor and a lot of drama in your tabletop games. Now, I'll show my bias here. I adore challenges. Back when Horus Heresy, back when 40k was much more like Horus Heresy in the way back days, the Chaos Space Marines had a thing where, like, if their sergeant killed somebody else in combat, they could roll on this like glory table, and I rolled the 66 on the D66, ascended to Demon Prince. That is like a core memory of mine from my role-playing history. Then when I started playing Horus Heresy, the last edition, I was still challenging everybody to combats because that's what a loyal son of the War Master does. And so today we're going to talk all about challenges, how the rules work, go through the process, the steps to kind of refamiliarize myself and you with how challenges function, and then talk about just some ones that you can kind of have locked on standby if challenges are something that's a little bit overwhelming for you. Really quickly here, I do want to say I have a new affiliate link with the Pop Goes the Monkey guys. I have a link in the description and my link tree down below. If you use that code as you go to Pop Goes the Monkey, it'll save you money on all your purchases for your Horus Heresy bits. I've been buying a whole bunch of stuff for them for years, and it's great to partner. All right, so how do challenges actually work? And we're going to walk through this from the perspective of the challenger, the one who's charging into combat. The first step is to declare the challenge. This is, you've already charged in, you've already done the movement for the charges and stuff like that. And at the top of the fight phase is the challenge sub-phase. This is when that's going to happen. This is literally just you picking a guy from your unit, going, I challenge you to Mortal Kombat, and then your opponent picks a guy from their unit, and same thing. And then you put them off to the side, and there you go. That is very important at this point to take a picture of these two dudes punching the snot out of each other, because one of them will probably die very soon. Do not wait until the photography phase. Next up are the gambits, which we will talk about here in just a second. What really matters for this step is the person with advantage in combat is the one who's going to basically reveal their gambit first. When you charge in, you are the person with advantage, and that can change afterwards depending on how the fight goes. But just for the record, if you're the charger, you pick your gambit first. Step 3 is focus. So this, to me, in my mind, is sort of like the Dragon Ball Z, everyone's powering up for their attacks kind of a thing. And what this is your modified initiative stat. So that's your initiative value plus whatever modifications your weapon may or may not do to you, plus a d6. The d6 is the focus roll. Now, there are a few modifiers to this, like, for example, heavier troops swing slower, essentially. They get a negative modifier. Certain weapons can give you a bonus or a negative modifier to your initiative value, and special rules exist in the game that give you bonuses to your focus roll. Something like Duelist's Edge gives you d6 plus 1 instead of d6. I think it's for every 5 guys in the unit that's with your leader, not including them, it's plus 1 to the focus point as well. So you're going to roll those dice out, and whichever one has the highest total after all that kind of calculation, it sounds like a lot, it's really not. That is the fighter who's going to swing first. Also, the player who gains advantage. So if the fight continues, whoever wins this roll off is the one who has to reveal their gambits in the next fight phase. Not only do you swing first, you get plus 1 to your attack. You want advantage. So now that we know who's striking first and the total attack value, because you can plus 1 if you have advantage, now we're going to roll it all out. This is very basic. The person who rolled highest is going to tag the other fighter first. If they're still alive, that fighter will then tag the first fighter right back. Now, if you both survive each other's blows, the player with advantage can actually choose to keep the fight going. It essentially dumps you right back into step 2 of this whole phase. You've already declared who's fighting, and this is when you go back to choosing your gambits. So if you're the aggressor, you can kind of dictate combat. If you get, a psyker into combat and you have like a vicious warlord or whatever, they want to run away, but you don't want to let them run away. So you can just keep the combat going to push this forward. Don't stop until the hero's dead. And this is something that it kind of took me a second to digest when I think about the new edition. When they rolled out all the rules for challenges and stuff like that, it seemed like, oh man, this is going to be injecting like a huge amount of time into an already long game. But because you can continue challenges, it does feel like you're trading these really cool epic blows, and this fight can be fully resolved before moving into anything else. It's not like every round you have to go and redo the entire full sequence. You can if you want to, but generally speaking, if one of you wants to get the hero pinned down and killed really quickly, that fight will resolve in a dramatic and relatively quick way. It sounds longer to do this than it actually is what I'm saying. And the last step is glory. So either nobody wants to keep the fight going, in which case you can do this again next round, or one of you destroys the other, but this is the final step. And essentially you're going to, as the winner, if any of you won, add how many wounds you dealt to the enemy hero to your overall combat score for the resolution of the combat going on around you. It's essentially a little bonus you get, and the idea here is your troops are going, hell yeah, as you kill the enemy leader, and their troops are going, oh no, we're hosed, as their leader dies. So it's this kind of swing. And then you move into the combat with the rest of that unit, now knowing the modified combat score. I breezed through it pretty quickly. It only takes up like 2 pages with all the minutia involved in the rulebook. Challenges are very simple. Pick a dude, pick a gambit, roll out to see who strikes first, do the striking, see if you continue. And so in that equation, as we look at this as players, and I don't even mean like competitively or anything like that, I mean even as people trying to tell a story, what levers do we have to pull at our disposal? Off the top of my head, I can think of initiative, the focus roll, gambits, and your weapon loadout. Let's start with the last one, weapons. There are a bajillion weapons in Horus Heresy across the different Libers. They're being constantly added through PDFs that Games Workshop is dropping on us. Like, to talk about them broadly and conceptually is a bit difficult. In broad sense, if you're looking to have a character who does challenges, right, who goes out and headhunts other characters, you either want to strike the firstest or the lastest. And what I mean by that is build everything up to where you have a ton of focus modifiers and bonuses, so this hero of yours who is meant to kill Marines will almost certainly strike first, right? Unless there's like a crazy roll on the focus roll for your opponent. The other option, right, and hopefully if they strike first, they can kill the guy before they get fought back. The other option is to strike lastest, and what I mean by this is have a guy that is so tanky that he can take the hit, but when he gets to strike, he's going to kill whatever he touches. It's not even really a question. And this I'm talking about like a Saturnine Praetor with the like super hammer that turns Marines into dust. If he's in a challenge, he is not worried about a power sword, really. So he doesn't have to care. That's really my only like inclination to help you pick a direction is, unless you're trying to do something specific, you either want to be striking first or hardest. Meaning you're going to deliver the final blow, the last one. But the reason I wanted to touch on that note is that in this new edition of Horus Heresy, it's not really as cut and dry as it used to be with the flat initiative modifier, or the flat initiative value rather. Now that we have all these modifiers to it, it becomes much more interesting for certain factions. For example, if you have we'll say a Centurion with a Power Fist, and he's with a unit of 5 guys. Okay, he gets into a challenge. He's going to be swinging pretty slow. The Power Fist, I believe, has a -3 to its modifier, initiative modifier. So, like, generally speaking, if you and another Praetor or Centurion were to roll off in the focus roll, you would generally be going last. This equation changes if, for example, he's in a unit of 20 Marines. You get +1 to your focus roll for every 5 dudes. So a crappier hero with a slower fist going into a smaller squad, like a charging into a smaller squad, will still have some means of getting his focus roll kind of pushed up. When you then factor in Legion-specific things, like a lot of the Legion-specific weapons will have their own unique kind of initiative things. Some of them will affect weapon skill instead of initiative, whatever. But when you get into things like the Emperor's Children have duelist edge, or just naturally high initiative stats, like these things become epic. So my point in saying all this is, when you see a negative initiative modifier in our weapon, don't discount it immediately just because it means you're going to be swinging second, generally mathematically, because there are ways to modify that. Again, pull that lever in the focus roll with your weapon choices to be able to get that up higher. So don't discount weapons like the Power Fist, the Thunderhammer, that kind of thing. But in general, if you're looking for a hero that can go do challenges, Again, my simplified point is you either want to be striking first or have a hero so tanky that they are going to be striking last with the final hit that puts the enemy in the dirt. So let's move on to talking about gambits. This is actually a big topic because it's a whole new kind of game mindset injected into this new edition. You have access to generally 10 different gambits at any given time. There's 9 base ones that everyone can use, and then of course by signing up for a legion you get your own gambit. Now that's an immense amount of choices when it comes to a single combat happening, but what I want to do is talk you through them. We're going to just discuss how they can be used, functioned. I'm going to give my own little hot takes here, and really by the end of this video I distilled it down to 3 that you can kind of have on hand in your brain. That'll help you for most situations. And so we'll kick it off with Seize the Initiative. If this gambit is selected, then the controlling player may roll an additional dice in the focus step and discard the dice with the lowest result before determining the total. I like this one. It is my default. It just kind of shores up the edges statistically for rolling a crappy roll on the focus roll. If you are a character who's trying to spec into going first, you have all the modifiers you can for your weapon or your legion or whatever to get in there and strike first, this is a great one because it's going to just kind of alleviate the possibility that you roll really terrible and your opponent rolls really fire. Next is Flurry of Blows. If this gambit is selected, then the model controlled by the player that selected this gambit gains a bonus of plus D3 to its current attack characteristic. But any hits inflicted by these attacks have their damage characteristics set to 1, and this may not be modified by any special rule, including Shred X, Critical Hit X, that kind of stuff. And this can be a really interesting choice on a hero who has advantage and already has a bunch of attacks, say something with dual lightning claws. Because essentially what you're trying to do is let the weight of dice get some attack through. They might all be damage 1, but depending on what you're going against, you don't need a lot of damage. Next is Test the Foe. If this gambit is selected, then the model for which it is selected gains no benefit in the focus or strike steps, but if not removed as a casualty, automatically gains advantage in the next glory step. It's not a bad one if you think that your boy can survive a round of combat and you have a lot of negative modifiers on your initiative, right? If you're chonky and slow and you think that you can take a punch, go ahead and let them swing first, because when then you swing back, again, you gain advantage, you can keep the combat going. You're going to pummel them now that you have +1 attack and striking first. If you're chonky and slow, let them go ahead and swing first, because then you know that when you have advantage, you're going to clobber them. Next is Guard Up. If this gambit is selected, the model for which it is selected gains a bonus of +1 to their weapon skill characteristic in the strike step, but may only make a single attack regardless of their attack characteristic. In the strike step, each attack made by the enemy model that fails to hit grants the player that selected this gambit a bonus of +1 to the next focus roll made if the challenge continues. If you are thinking that your hero and theirs can trade a few blows, maybe you're both kind of smaller heroes on that kind of weaker end, you get +1 to your weapon skill, which makes you hit harder, but also harder to be hit. It's a defensive buff as well. And you are banking on your opponent missing so you can snag a few extra focus points in the next roll. There are a few ways for lower minor characters like sergeants and stuff to become champions to gain that keyword so they can get into challenges. If I had 2 of those characters fighting each other, I would absolutely do this. It's defensive, right? So you're going to survive one round, but then you're going to just absolutely attack them the next one. Next is Taunt and Bait. If this gambit is selected, then the model controlled by the player that selected this gambit has its weapon skill and attack characteristic reduced to be equal to those of the enemy model, or if their characteristics were already equal, by an additional -1. In the strike step. However, for each time a player has selected this gambit in the current challenge, they gain +1 combat resolution point if they win that challenge. I'm just going to be honest with you, this is a hard pass for me. If someone knows of a great way to make use of this that's consistent, please let me know. But to be honest, I would much rather just have my hero do something or find a way to withdraw. Next is Grandstand. If this gambit is selected, then the controlling player must roll an additional dice in the focus step and discard the dice with the highest result before determining the total, and the model gains no bonus to focus roll from outside support. However, In the strike step, the model under that player's control gains a bonus to their attack characteristic equal to the outside support bonus they would normally have claimed in the focus step. So we'll go back to our power fist, sergeant who has the prime upgrade that makes him a champion. Okay, that dude can be in a unit of 20 guys. If he goes into a challenge and chooses this, instead of getting that to his focus roll, he gets it to his attack characteristic. That's mean. And I like this as a rule simply because it makes an interesting dynamic for people like myself who love infantry heavy lists. It's just a different opportunity to kind of swing above their weight class, right? This might be a crappy guy, but because he's got his 19 best friends with him, he's acting all tough. Next is Feint and Repose. This gambit may only be selected by the player choosing the first gambit in the face-off step. Once selected, the player that selected this gambit may name any other gambit, including faction-specific ones, that the player does not have access to, and the opposing player may not select that gambit in this face-off step. If you know that they're planning to do something particularly, deviant or whatever, or if you're the one charging in and you want to shut off any way for them to kind of manipulate the math that you already kind of calculated in your head, this is that. Just turn it off for your opponent. Next is Withdraw. If this gambit is selected, the model for which it was selected may only make a single attack regardless of their attack characteristic during the strike step. However, in the glory step, a player that has selected this gambit may choose to end the challenge with no combat resolution points scored by either player, as long as the model under their control has not been removed as a casualty during the strike step. If you are a psyker in the backfield who does not have a good weapon, and you do not want this character in combat, this is one that you can choose that keeps them technically in the combat, so they're not being disgraced and having like their leadership value drop because of that, because they refused a challenge. But you're also not letting your opponent keep it going, right? You can stop that kind of hounding to shut down the combat and keep this going. And lastly, for the core gambits is Finishing Blow. If this gambit is selected, then the controlling player must roll an additional dice in the focus step, discard the dice with the highest result before determining the total of that focus roll. However, a model for which the Finishing Blow gambit has been selected gains a bonus of +1 to their strength and damage characteristic of all hits inflicted in the strike step. So you're gambling that maybe you can take a hit, or maybe you can just roll high enough, or you're average enough that it's not going to matter. It'll be a wash on the focus roll anyway. But if you tap them with your weapon with a +1 to the strength and damage, they're just going to turn to dust. That's a good one to go for. Now this next part I have written and rewritten multiple times because I keep finding ways to condense it. It's a lot of it's just extra information. At the core of it, what I really want to say is, if you find yourself in a challenge, you're going to go through this little mental tree here to process what's going to happen. The question is, do you want to be in a challenge? First of all, because if not, you're either going to decline the challenge or use Withdraw or something like that to ensure that your character isn't cut down immediately by this combat because your opponent can keep it going. You could also try Guard Up, which kind of raises your defensive stats, and then you can dictate combat in the next sequence of fighting. That's an idea. But those are your two big options if you don't want to be there. Withdraw and Guard Up. If the answer is yes, and you find yourself in combat and you do want to be there, the questions that I ask myself are, can you survive a hit from them? So ask your opponent what weapons they're carrying. And can you kill them easily based on the weapons that you are carrying? These are things like ignoring their armor, that kind of stuff, or maybe some weapons ignore shrouded saves, all that kind of stuff, whatever it is. And do you think this combat is going to be ongoing? Because if you both have like damage 1 weapons, it's not likely that you're going to be killing each other immediately off the bat. It might take a few rounds. And now you can look at those gambits with a new context. If you are unsure of what to do and you don't even care about challenges whatsoever, just choose Seize the Initiative. There's no downsides to trying to strike first. And since there's already so much to learn in Horus Heresy 3rd edition, the way that I have kind of distilled it from my personal practice, and I've tried other gambits, but really my suggestion is really to remember these 3, and that is Seize the Initiative is going to help you fight first. Grandstand is going to help you fight harder. This is particularly if you're in a large crowded unit. Finishing Blow is going to do more damage, another version of fights harder. I kind of put those two together, that's like a slash. And the third thing here is Withdraw lets you end fights. Those three, one that lets you fight first, one that lets you fight harder, and one that lets you run away, are really all you need to know. The Legion specific ones are awesome because they're oftentimes meant to convey a specific theme or a dynamic or give you some kind of thematic edge over your opponent. But they're so different from each other, and also from some of the core ones, that they're just going to be situational. But a lot of folks have expressed appreciation for the more practical examples of things in the game. So I thought I would throw out a few of those. I have 3 examples here using these specific, gambits and like how they might be used in the challenge setting. So first off is a Praetor or Centurion in Saturnine armor with the hammer. Right, these guys are living siege engines. They are not concerned with most combats they enter, unless it's like a Primarch, something you can open them like a beer can. This is an example of something where guard up is great. You're so bulky that you are not going to get initiative anyway. You're not in a race for it, so don't bother. Buffing the weapon skill means that most attacks coming at you are going to miss, and the ones that land have to pierce an ungodly amount of armor. And then next round, you're going to come back harder when the Saturnine guy has advantage and gets +1 to his attack. So a great example of something like guard up where that's strategically useful. The second option I have here is a Legion Champion, and his whole reason for being is to hunt Marines. Okay, he has the Paragon Blade, it's fantastic. He has a rule where he has to challenge everyone if he can get into combat with someone. And so when I think of gambits, my go-to for him is Seize the Initiative. He is not armed with the killiest of things. He is not in the toughest of armor. But if I can swing first, I'll definitely snipe out some non-combat heroes like Psychers, Vigilators, all those kinds of heroes that you can challenge and they just don't want to be in combat. He will hunt them to the teeth and likely keep the combat going if you'd like to. And lastly, to flip the script, we have ourselves the Psyker here who doesn't want to give up his leadership stat for the combat he's in because he's with a good unit. It's just that he doesn't want to fight. If you have that Psyker, do not give up that leadership stat. I say go for withdraw. If you don't get killed immediately, you're going to shut down that combat and give your unit a chance to tag back hard in the immediate fighting after this. And then hopefully next round when it rolls around, the math is different, right? You now overwhelm your opponent because your unit that you were attached to was fantastic. They did all the heavy lifting. This video is already getting a little bit long. I hope this was helpful. I mean, it seems a bit rambly, just kind of going through the gambits and talking about my thoughts on them. Like I said, just distill it down to a few that you can mentally reach for very quickly. Mine are fighting firstest, fighting harder, and then just getting out of there. If you have any thoughts on how to use these gambits more tactically, like something I missed, if I passed one over or whatever, please leave it in the comments down below. I always pin the most helpful comments to the top, so new players have a resource coming into the game. Thank you so much for hanging out and listening. I'll catch you next time. Happy wargaming.